I did not realize that I was entering crisis situation by the time I committed a felony. And really, that was just in response to everything that was going on. By that point, I just wanted to run away from my life. Prison looked like a good escape, right? I had given up on myself. I wanted other people to give up on me too. Just stop the pressure. Stop trying to help me. Stop trying to fix me. Just leave me alone. And prison seemed like a place where people would give up. Oh, she's too far gone. And I would just finally have some peace. That I'm not saying that was rational thinking. It wasn't at all, but that's how badly I felt at the time that that looked like a solution.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Counseling in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am the Vice President at Heart and Solutions in charge of the Behavioral Health Department. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today joins us from Minneapolis, Minnesota, just north of us. She is currently an IT solutions architect at Bot Consulting. Holly Bot is an author. She's a podcaster. She is a public speaker and just an advocate for people who have gone through incarceration and are re-entering into life. She is the host of the From Surviving to Living podcast series, and she is working on some books that will help people to understand what it's like and to be able to share their own stories of incarceration while in prison, and then also that experience of re-entry after prison. So welcome, Holly. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So, Holly, tell me, what is Bot Consulting and what is a IT solution architect?
So, Bot Consulting is my own company. I'm a contractor for IT work. And a solution architect is someone who comes in to a company who needs to make changes in their software, whatever programming they're using, and even improve the efficiency of a company. I'm essentially a specialist in scaling up. So if a business is poised for or desires rapid growth, then I would come in and evaluate all of their processes in different departments and recommend solutions that make them more money with what they already have, more efficiencies, and then put in place a foundation where they can grow infinitely. So it's really exciting, super fun.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So now tell us about From Surviving to Living. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah. So um, I was in prison for 8 years. And before I went to prison, I had an award-winning blog and I had written a book, and I really found, and that was very organic. I was excited about something. I started to share it and then just found I loved doing that. And so while I was in prison and had all of these experiences, there's a lot of trauma, but there's also good things happening. I thought, I wonder if when I get out, just like I did before in sharing this and writing about it, if I should do that again. I did try. to start writing as soon as I was released from prison, but I was so close to the trauma. The experiences were too fresh, and it was really too challenging to write right then. And so I put it on hold. And then 5 years later, I took up the pen again and found that this time I could look back with perspective and find it very helpful. And it was very healing for me to work through all of those experiences. And I found that other people, I was doing it in a blog format, writing each chapter of the book, one blog post at a time. Found that other people really felt it was encouraging and helpful for them, whether they had been in prison or had a loved one in prison. And and then I was asked, do you have an audio version? I'm not a reader. And so I thought I would like to podcast that. And so my serial audiobook podcast was formed, and that's each chapter of the book is another episode. And it's not just me reading the blog posts. I love music. I love drama. I want it to be entertaining. I want to listen to it. And so I decided to make it more of a production. Each episode, music, fun, sound effects. And then opportunity to be in a television studio opened up. It was really quite, I didn't expect that. I wasn't looking for it, but I thought, I wonder if this is a way for me to ask other people about their experiences, and they can have this healing process I'm having, and we can share it together. Many of my guests, and this surprised me at first when they started saying this after the television interview on my Spotlight series, they said, wow, that was really therapeutic. Thank you for having me. And so then I knew this is a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you bring in guests then as well. Not only do you have your own podcast series audiobook, but you also have guests coming in. Are your guests also people who have been incarcerated, or is it just a wide variety of people that come onto your podcast?
It's more of a wide variety. I have had people who were incarcerated. I've also had people suffering from addiction. And so I wanted to be really diverse, alcoholism, other things like that, because trauma comes from so many different places, and often some of those traumas might eventually lead you to incarceration if you don't recognize the problem is now. So I'm not hoping to do that for the guest. I'm hoping to do that for the people watching, to find something they relate to. I had one episode, it was a woman who had been a bank robber. She had robbed 5 banks. And before that, she had been an A student in high school. She'd been a great student in college. She was a journalist with a great job interviewing famous people. So, how does one go from that to robbing banks? She was just as surprised as everyone else to find that she had mental health issues that were unchecked for so many years that it led her to a gambling addiction and eventually to suicidal ideation and bank robbery. So, the purpose of that show was to let people know you can have mental health concerns and not even know it. And it can become crisis mode before you realize something's wrong. So, I want this to be an eye opener. Don't let it get that far for yourself. Please see what you can get from this. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you described your prison time as a disruption into your life. And so was this an unexpected situation for you as well? Were you just as surprised as anyone?
I was very surprised. I had suffered from serious depression and other mental health issues since I was about 18 or 19 years old. By the time I went to prison, I was 35 or 36. And so, all during that time, between my teen years and my incarceration, I searched for so many solutions, counselors, saw psychiatrists, and read books. Truthfully, though, I think I was looking for a quick fix. I just felt uncomfortable being depressed and didn't want to feel that way. I wasn't really interested in the hard work required to fix it, just wanted to feel better. And I did not realize that I was entering crisis situation by the time I committed a felony. And really, that was just in response to everything that was going on. By that point, I just wanted to run away from my life. Prison looked like a good escape, right? I had given up on myself. I wanted other people to give up on me too. Just stop the pressure. Stop trying to help me. Stop trying to fix me. Just leave me alone. And prison seemed like a place where people would give up. Oh, she's too far gone. And I would just finally have some peace. That I'm not saying that was rational thinking. It wasn't at all, but that's how badly I felt at the time that that looked like a solution.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had suffered from depression from, 18, 19 years old. Had you tried counseling before going into prison, or was it not till you got into prison that you really started speaking to a counselor?
I tried counseling before then. However, I did not make it a priority. So if finances got in the way or something, I just didn't go. And so I did not have any long-term counseling with one person. It was just every time I really felt in a bind, let's go see someone for a couple sessions if I can afford it. And I would either feel a little bit better and stop going, or I wouldn't feel better and not see the reason to go. And so I did, my expectations were off. I did not have the understanding that this was a process and a journey, and that if it took me all this years to feel this bad, I wasn't going to get better in a month, you know. So that was probably where I was at when I entered prison. And I had some respect for counseling and psychiatry, but not a lot because I felt I'd been suffering for so long, and a doctor can fix a broken bone and you're better in 6 weeks. And so this seems to be much less satisfying. But while I was in prison, I met some really great women. And so there were therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and interns, and it was required. I had to take treatment and programming. You know, programming is highly stressed in Minnesota prisons, and there's a lot of it available. There's beyond trauma, parenting classes, all types of things. And it was so foreign to me. I was given these workbooks, and we're going to do these assignments about your life. We're going to do group therapy. We're going to do one-on-one sessions. It was 3 days a week. And to me, at first, it was bewildering. I don't understand the assignments. I don't understand how this is going to help me. I wasn't resistant much, but I was mainly just bewildered. How do these things go together? Um, and I did treatment my second year in prison, and that was about a year long. And then after that, I still had six more years of prison to do, 5 6 years. And there was then like 6 week classes, 8 week classes, and also you could see a therapist on the side if you wanted. That's how long it took. I would look back on a class I'd taken and think, wow, that really goes deeper into what I learned in treatment. And I'm beginning to internalize it and be able to apply it as a way of life. Even though treatment was a year long, it still took classes after that and therapy after that to work through the skills that I had been taught and actually use them and see the effects in a positive way. After prison, I was on probation, and my probation officer told me I had to do more therapy. And I thought, what do I need that for? Just leave me alone. I've done lately. But I did go to therapy then for another year and a half, 2 years, and still found I was building on things. And by that point, I was sort of resistant. I was just tired, but still wanted, if I'm going to be here, I want to do a good job. I want to get everything out of it that I can, and found that I was still growing and having another positive experience. And it led me to really maybe want to do some of that myself, which I haven't. But I've entered a biblical counseling certification program to just kind of mentor people in a very careful way that's respectful and truly helpful. But I don't think I ever would have considered such a thing if I hadn't gone through this long journey and seen the benefits of it. And of course, there were bad counseling experiences thrown in there as well. Prison is really a place of change. And so, and a place for interns, people who are getting PhDs or other, licensing, they come in there for internships. I remember it must have been about 2 years before I was going to leave. And I had heard all these stories how reentry, leaving prison can be super challenging and all of these things you might need to worry about. And I thought, I want to at this point plan for that and do the best that I can. And I would like some help doing that so that I'm making wise decisions. I thought, well, why not a prison therapist? They must know about these challenges. So I asked for one, and I was sent to see an intern. I don't know if I was her first person she'd ever been with, or if she, I don't know, but it was not good at all. In fact, it was quite frightening for me. I was put in a little office with glass windows, and she sat across from me. And she started by asking, "Why are you here? What do you want to get out of this?" And so I said, "I am looking for help on reentry, everything I just described to you." And then I asked her, I said, "Do you have any experience with people leaving prison and the challenges they face?" And the most strange thing happened. She sat back, she crossed her arms, she got really angry looking, which was confusing for me. And then she started raising her voice and saying, "How dare you challenge whether or not I have the skills and credentials to treat you?" And I was bewildered, like, what are you talking about? And so I said, "I assume that you do, or you wouldn't be employed here, and I wouldn't be sitting in front of you. I'm not questioning your education. I want to know, can you help me with these certain things? Do you have experience with it, anyways?" That did not soothe her at all. She started shouting, you know, um, at me, very angry. How dare I question her ability to? It was, I was leaning further and further away. And know that in prison, you are very vulnerable. In fact, everyone incarcerated is labeled a vulnerable adult, because if someone tells you to do something in a guard and you don't do it, you can be sent to solitary confinement. You can lose visiting privileges. You can lose phone privileges, all sorts of things. So you're always walking on eggshells because you're subject to people's personalities. And here's this woman yelling at me. So I said, "I am not comfortable with this experience, and I would really like to go back to my room now." And she said, "Fine." And I left, and I wrote to her supervisor and said, "I would really like someone else. Here's this experience that I just had and what that looks like." And they wrote back to me and said, "No, she's it. And you need to resolve that relationship with her," as if this was on me to fix this break in understanding. And they said, "And if you don't like her, you don't get anybody." And so that's just one of the counter experiences that one can expect in prison anyway. Anyways.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so glad that you recognized that that was not acceptable and that that was not what you were owed in the counseling session. You are owed respect in that session, and you are owed to be treated with care. And gosh, no therapist should ever raise their voice to you or give you that kind of, body language, because it sounds like even in addition to raising her voice and yelling, she was giving you some very aggressive body language as well. She was communicating a lot with her
Yes.
body about how she felt. And my goodness, and gosh, it is so challenging because, yeah, counselors are people. They are humans. And in the
Mhm.
same way that we've all got stuff that, gets to, it sounds like she was feeling insecure about not having the experience. And so she
Yeah.
was reacting to that. My goodness. And so I'm so glad that you recognized that you didn't internalize that, right? That you
Yeah.
didn't say, oh, well, that's how counseling is, or, oh, well, I shouldn't have questioned her. You were like,
Yeah.
no, I have the right to know this. I have the right
Yeah.
to ask these questions. My goodness. Wow. And what a vulnerable place to be and to be
Hmm.
asking for help. And the fact that you were the one who actively sought out that help.
Yeah.
And said, I want some mentoring here. I want somebody to kind of
Yeah.
walk with me as I do this. I know there are always going to be challenges. And so let me reach out and then to have that experience. And so what I'm just so grateful about is that that didn't stop you from continuing to reach out and
Yes.
continuing to ask for mentorship and to mentor others.
Yeah.
For so many, that could have been it for that.
Yeah. And I think it's unfortunate, or maybe some people, I suppose internship is a way to explore the career that you're thinking about and try it out. And I definitely met some interns who were in the wrong field. One time in treatment, there was an intern, I think it was just real short term, a week or two. Anyway, she was observing the class and very quiet. And I moved to whisper something to her because in prison we're all just a bunch of girls and we're laughing, we like to have a nice time, that we're side talking and having fun. And so I went to say something to her that was just kind of funny, and she leaped back in terror, like she was so tense. And I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it seemed like the experience she was having is that she was locked in this room with a bunch of dangerous criminals, and she didn't know when the shoe was going to drop and she was going to need to run for her life. And I gave her this look like, what are you doing? I mean, what is this disconnect? I am 5 feet tall, 110 pounds. So definitely not going to be getting you. And so that also, and that happened more than once, and not just to me, but to the other women. Um, it really showed us, I don't even know how to explain how that felt, but maybe a cognitive dissonance might be me some, that I wasn't seeing myself in a way that matched reality, or there was some middle there where she was too extreme and perhaps I was too casual. I don't know, but it was hurtful. It was hurtful. So I don't want to ever do that to someone else, you know, make assumptions about that person that caused me to be so anxious that I would receive them in a way that would crush their identity or self-esteem, even in a temporary way. And that's really what that was.
Absolutely. It speaks to some things that you brought up before about kind of the vilification of certain acts. And
Yeah.
there's this tendency, I think, I think especially in like our Western society where uh the acts, we see the act as the person. And
Yes.
and so if we say, okay, this person robbed a bank or committed a felony, then we make assumptions about that person. And so my undergraduate is in criminal justice because I thought I wanted to be an attorney. And sometimes people are like, you should have been an attorney, but I wanted to be an attorney. And because I like the kind of black and white of the law, right? Then I started studying it and I realized there is no black and white of the law at all. The
Yeah.
entire law and the entire system is gray. And it is different
Yes.
shades of gray depending on who you ask. And so when I was studying criminal justice, I came to realize that, and I came to realize, okay, there's kind of two sides of the criminal justice system. There is the punitive side, and there is the rehabilitation side. And as we started learning more about the rehabilitation side, we started learning about, well, what causes people to go to prison, right? What starts
Mhm.
those actions. And that's how I ended up in the field that I'm in, because
Yeah.
I remember there was kind of this moment where I was like, I gotta pick a path. What side of this fence do I want to be on? And
Mhm.
I want to be on the prevention, yes,
Yeah.
helping side, and not on the punitive side. So, when you're talking about uh, the assumptions that are made about people who have committed an act, and it's not only people who've been incarcerated for an act, but it's really any act that people don't agree with or
Yes.
don't understand or don't
Yes.
feel comfortable with, right? It's dyeing your hair pink, that people say, oh,
Yes.
this is what that says about that person. They're impulsive. They don't think about, right? And so I think it stems to that much bigger and broader
Mhm.
sense, where I think so many of us can relate with what you're saying,
Mhm.
what you experience there.
Yes. And I really have come to learn that it's about relationship and community that really makes us strong and keeps us in a good place. And so, knowing that, I have sought to kind of break down some of these barriers, even in my own, or to help other people be more understanding, empathetic, and compassionate. So, one of my guests that I had on my Spotlight series was a transgender woman. It was a man who had changed into a woman and was incarcerated after having surgery and put in a men's prison and put in a room with seven other men as a bedroom, and so very traumatic experiences. And then finally, after several years, was transferred to the facility that I was at. Not while I was there, she was there after. But helping people to understand someone so different, and it wasn't for everyone to agree with or like. It's not about that. It's a conversation of how do we love someone that we have never had any similar experience with? How do we ask nice questions? How do we be kind and just learn about that person and come to understand a little bit of where they're coming from? And so having that conversation, it was good for me. I think one reason I have the podcast I have is not so I can become a great interviewer, turn into the next Diane Sawyer, but so that I can learn how to have diverse relationships and have that opportunity to know them before the interview, during, and then follow up with them after and really expand my world. And that has been very helpful, so helpful for me and hopefully for them. I wanted to speak to something else since you mentioned the criminal justice system in your studies. Um, One thing I found, even though Minnesota is very high on reform and rehabilitation and has a pretty low recidivism rate, at the same time, I think some people in prison staff sees that as, well, that's just a job we have to perform, but let's not go overboard there. And there was a therapist at my prison who was great. He worked so hard. He was very empathetic, and he would also, if he saw he could, seek as a way to be an advocate for the person that he was helping, right? Because you're very powerless when you're in prison, very powerless. Um, and so he recognized that and thought, okay, well, if there's any action I can take, I will. And after a number of years, he was really burnt out because what he experienced was the prison hated his advocacy. They just wanted him to stop bothering us. You're supposed to be on our team. So why are you asking us for things that help them? And so he took a sabbatical for like a year or two because he was just so stressed. And after that, he told the prison, I will come back part-time and you don't even have to pay me, free of charge. And I will tell you that at that time they were very short-handed, which is usually the case, especially at men's prisons. If you ask for a therapist, you had better be literally psychotic or you're not going to get one, because they just have so few, and it's prioritized. And that was certainly the case at times. The prison I was at, it's prioritized, you don't get one. And so for him to come back and offer free services would have been a boon for the prison. Great, take some of this stress off our hands. They told him, no thanks, you bother us too much, we don't even want you free. And that really, since that was early in my incarceration, kind of informed me about what I might expect as far as truly getting better or making it to 100% in this environment, that would be a real challenge. Maybe it was lip service more than actual the spirit of the law. We're just doing what we're told here. It's the letter of the law, not the spirit of really helping people. So that was hard to look at that and think, especially a person who is depressed, or at least for me, I had very little willpower, very little energy. There were times, even in prison, that I would be so depressed, I would lay in bed for months, didn't shower for 6 months or more, just washed up in my sink, didn't brush my teeth. In fact, when I left prison, my teeth were so bad from eating candy to feel better when I could, the low quality of dental services, and then my own poor hygiene routines, that I had to have really extensive dental work done once I was released from prison. And that was mainly due to my own depression, and I just didn't care. And to know then that if I was going to get better, first of all, I had to want it. And then it was going to be an uphill battle to get it. Really, is like, I'm just not even going to start. I don't even have the will to get out of bed today, let alone fight to have a therapist who's worth their salt. So, very hard.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot of information. That is sad. I mean, I heard you mention too that you like people in prison are considered vulnerable adults, which is so true. I've just never really thought of it that way, but like you're too scared to even like say no or like argue with somebody. How was that
Yes.
coming out of prison, like that reentry back into the real world? Like how was that? Was that hard to be able to like now you kind of have your own say, but also like scared to go back? Can you explain like that experience?
Yes. And so, one thing that's very interesting about a prison experience is the dehumanization. And I'm not saying that they're intentionally trying to do this to someone, but it's real. And that leads to self dehumanization and that powerlessness and fear of what could happen if I just say or do, or even look at someone the wrong way. You know, um, Coming out of prison with all of those things, I've always had a strong sense of agency and efficacy. Despite my depression, I thought to myself that if I wasn't feeling so low motivation, I could be very assertive, very confident. And so coming out of prison, I wanted to regain the assertive, confident demeanor that I'd had before. Going to prison is really a loss of identity. When I went, I had 5 children from 16 down to 4, and I was a stay-at-home, work-at-home mom. Going to prison for 8 years meant that they would almost all be adults by the time I was released. And so I would never be a stay-at-home, work-at-home mom of small children again. And that was all I knew. I mean, my identity was really wrapped up in all of that. So when I first got to prison, I didn't know myself at all because my world was related to 5 children who I just served them and my husband all the time. Someone needs water, I'm getting you water, I'm making meals, I'm driving people everywhere. And so once I was in prison, I sat in my room and didn't know what to do with myself. And someone would say, "Hey, do you want to come outside with me?" And I'd think, "Do I? Is that something I would like? I don't even know if I would like that. Do I like going outside just for the sake of me? I have no idea." And so it took years, years of me simply, "Oh, well, I'll go outside and I'll see if I like it." Because up till then, the question would be, "Well, does someone need me?" Well, then I'm there. No one needs me for anything. That's what I do with myself. By the time I left prison, I had a much stronger sense of who I was just as an individual. And then I was excited to explore that upon release, where I had really the autonomy to do so, but I was still on probation. And when you're first released from probation, the person who's sent to supervise you doesn't know you at all. So it can be very restrictive until they come to have some levels of trust with you, which can be rather quick. I mean, a month or two, and you're having some new freedoms and stuff. Um, but supervised release is just prison outside of your house. That's what it is. And so that also was a little bit hard for me because I wasn't living the lives I could see my neighbors and my family living, and often they wanted to do things I just wasn't allowed yet to do, like take a trip. Well, I've got to have a travel permit. I can't just leave with you tonight. If you feel like impulsively going over to Wisconsin or down to Iowa, I won't be going with you because I need a permit to do that. So um reentry took some time to really further develop myself and feel confident in what I was doing. And I think that's a very common struggle. I don't know about with men as much as women. I don't want to be stereotypical, so I'll just explain. There was no men in my prison other than guards, just women. And what I really saw is that women are very polite to their own detriment, right? We want to be social. We want to be good hostesses. We don't want people feeling uncomfortable, generally speaking. That was no different in prison, where it was one inmate to another, which I guess I'm explaining loose boundaries. And we have that same submissive attitude towards the guards and authority and stuff. And so where does that end? And you start to realize not all of this is good for me. And I had to learn all of that in prison too. How to say no when you really feel the answer is no, instead of just remaining silent or being overly polite, right? And spending time with someone you don't want to spend time with, or other things that are not good for us. And coming out of prison, the same thing holds true. How do I have good boundaries in my expanding world?
Absolutely. I mean, you discussed how you were able to come to a lot of these new beliefs and these new ideas, and kind of the idea that you had about therapy before of like, well, I'll go kind of piecemeal, and then going through. I mean, spending 8 years incarcerated with mandatory counseling, you are essentially you're able to go through childhood again. It's a second childhood. And the things that we learned in our first 8 years in our first childhood are going to be radically different than that opportunity to go through similar circumstances, but with our own adult developed brain. And being able to see, oh, okay, when I had an authority figure like this guard, as a child, this is how I responded because, like right now, it's dangerous uh, to not accept what's being told to me or to not go along with, what my peers want me to do or what an authority figure wants me to do. And sometimes going through that kind of second childhood in prison is safer. It's a safer childhood than the
Mm-hmm.
childhood that we went through in our first 8 years. And so it is in some ways that opportunity to be able to learn that about ourselves and to go, okay,
Yes.
this is how I was taught to do this. And I'm not going to do that anymore, right? It doesn't
Yeah.
work for me. It didn't work for me. And I'm going to look at what I want to do and what I feel. It reminded me, have you ever seen Runaway Bride? It's
Mm-hmm.
a Julia Roberts movie, right? And
Yeah.
she doesn't know how she likes her eggs because she always had eggs the way that her fiance had eggs. And
Yes.
when you
Yeah.
said, I'm going outside to see if I like being outside, I love that. I love that because we are so conditioned and we can be so conditioned to
Mm-hmm.
do for others and do for others. And you took that opportunity
Yeah.
and you grew the ability to say, no, this is what I like. This is what I want.
And something else I learned is that what it's about is never really what it's about. Right. And so looking deeper into things and trying to be not only introspective, but understand others. And there was this guard, he was a sergeant at the prison. And when I first got there, um, I was very loud and rambunctious. I have a very loud, not attractive at all laugh, which I use a lot. My kids are always embarrassed to go with me to a comedy movie theater because I'm the only one in the audience and everybody can hear me laughing. And I took that to prison with me. And this guard loved cathedral quiet. And I had no idea. And so I was so disruptive. And so he just punished me. And which basically I was grounded to my room almost for months on end. And I was really hostile towards authority at this point. I was not taking accountability or responsibility for my own actions. I mean, I knew I had done something to be in prison, but that's as far as I took it. And now everybody's just being mean. It's not my fault. And so I was very angry, especially at that guard for grounding me all the time. As years went by, I began to realize here's what he did. Every time someone moved into the unit he supervised, the living unit, he would write everybody up. Even if he couldn't find a reason, which he usually could, he would just make something up. And you just like getting a ticket from a police officer, you have to go review it with him and sign it or refuse to sign, but you at least have to take the ticket from the guard that you received. So I would watch as women came up and he would carefully watch them. If they became argumentative, argued with him at all, he was going to discipline them for every little thing he could find because it was his opinion they did not have a right understanding of authority and he was going to train them. If they came up and didn't say anything and just signed it and apologized, even if they, especially if they hadn't actually done anything wrong, he would never write them up again, even if they deserved it, because in his mind, they had a right understanding of authority and they did not need punishment. They had that self understanding. And it wasn't long after I left my room in a big hurry to go to canteen, and you're not supposed to leave your room a disaster, right? They don't know how long you're going to be gone, and it's like the army. You're supposed to have a nice room. And so I came back after 15 minutes and he had written me up for having a messy room. First write up I had had in years. And so I asked him, can you explain why I got this? He did. And I said, I am sorry. And then I made a very insincere promise. I said, I will never do it again. I didn't realize what I was saying at the time was, as long as you're around, I won't do this because I don't want you to write me up. Anyway, so I said that to him. It was just a couple months later. Once again, I was short on time and I had to go somewhere for 15 minutes and my room was a mess. And I thought to myself, oh, well, he's not working. I'll be fine. And so I, I dashed out. And when I got back, literally 15 minutes later, he had just come on duty and was doing room inspections and had written me up. And I was so embarrassed because it was literally the exact thing I had promised him wouldn't happen. And here I am. And so I did something I never would have done at the beginning of my prison sentence. You can write internal mail in the prison, they're called kites. And I wrote him a kite and I said, thank you for holding me to this standard. I realized now I was lying. I was just trying to get out of trouble, not do the right thing. That can be a very dangerous attitude when I go on probation because a violation there could have me returned to prison, where a violation here is just grounded to my room for a day. Big deal. And so I would rather learn this now while it's safe, as you said, relatively safe. These are lessons I needed to learn to see people respectfully, to understand my own motives properly in a safe space. And it does give a person a time to do that with an adult mind, like you said, without real serious repercussions. So I did benefit quite a bit from that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When you were discussing the idea that you kind of had before you were incarcerated, where you thought like, prison would be, at least people would stop, like they would get off my back about stuff, right? And like I could stop hounding myself about all the things that I should be doing or could be doing. And I so resonated with that too, because I think for so many people, who have a high efficacy, who have a lot of skill and high intelligence, but also struggle with mental health challenges. So also have anxiety, also have depression, right? So we've got this high standard for ourselves because we know what we're capable of. And then we've
Yeah.
also got these challenges. My daughter has a very, very high cognitive expression. She can problem solve like nothing else, but she also has dyslexia. And
Mhm.
so she fights with this all the time because everybody knows what she's capable of. We know what and she knows what she's capable of, but she's got
Mhm.
dyslexia and that slows her down. And then she gets upset with herself. And I can relate with this so much because I can remember having thoughts. When you said it, I was like, oh my gosh, you're right in here. Because I've had thoughts like that, right? Of like, if
Yeah.
I went to prison, everybody would stop asking me for things, right? I
Yeah.
wouldn't have to worry about, oh, did I do what I
Mhm.
was supposed to do today and all of that. I wouldn't have to worry about providing for myself, my family, my child, right? Taking care of them.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I can so relate with that, those daydreams of that, right? The comfort that the idea of structure, right? Now, whether it's reality or not, but the idea
Right.
of structure, right? Not having to have responsibility for how things go day to day, right? I'm
Mhm.
not cooking the meals. I'm not
Mhm.
making sure I have money for the food. And in that way, and people do say this about the military as well, is that once those things are kind of taken care of, right? You can go, okay, don't have to put energy towards that. Then those kinds of responsibilities that we're so focused on when we're high achieving, right? And when we like to
Yeah.
do things the best we can and the best we're able,
Yeah.
those kinds of expectations can fall to the side. And so we
Yes.
can then go, okay, what actually is it internal
Hmm.
that
Yep.
I want to work on and that I want to put my energy towards?
Yep.
So I can relate with that as well. Absolutely. Was it
Yes.
different than what you thought it would be when you kind of had those ideas of like, then all the pressure would just stop?
So something I guess and I touched on this briefly already, but in high achieving, those were usually individual pursuits, work, right? My work was my own. And as a mother, I really wanted to be super mom, and nobody's coming alongside to be a co-mom. I mean, my husband worked all the time, right? So he was co-parenting, but I don't think it's quite the same. So I was high achieving, and to be honest, wanted to be high achieving for that self-knowledge and then to be recognized, right? And so rather than pouring into others and having good relationship with others. I was just really working on appearances and image and all of these things that are, in IT terms, we'd call it a data silo. And a data silo is where all the information is locked away here, and the only way you get to it is you go in there, as opposed to a central source of truth, and everybody has free access to all these different categories. Once I was in prison, none of those things were there. They were taken off the table. What was left to me was relationship and restoring and rebuilding. And those relationships were not based on, wow, you're such a good worker. I'm so proud of you. Here's your performance review. And they weren't based on any other kind of personal achievement that we just want, look at me. Instead, it was about, I love you and I want to spend time with you. And how often before I went to prison did I just spend time with someone and truly enjoy them and have them enjoy me, where I didn't have some motive on my mind of, I really need to do good at this moment with this thing. I'm driving people places. Yeah, they're in the car, but I have a duty. I'm performing things. And so that it was very uncomfortable at first. It's a new way of thinking. It's a new way of living. And that I never expected. I expected the relationships to be as silent as everything else. Just leave me alone in every kind of way. But I am glad that that's one thing that's still available to people who are incarcerated, is the ability to have supportive community and restore those relationships. I'm convinced that's what makes successful reentry. First of all, it's transparency. And before I went to prison, I was not transparent. I think that I put on a brave face. And if people asked me how I wanted to appear to be the person I wanted to be: strong, brave, confident, successful. So I'm not going to tell you anything that goes against that image. And you don't get any help that way. Nobody knows you need help. At the same time, you're unapproachable. Who can relate to that? I mean, they might want to be that themselves, but they can't actually relate. And so then it's a very off-putting demeanor. And that's what I was like. So in prison, learning the safety of transparency, people really do love me if I'm myself. If I just admit I need help, that was revolutionary to me, that I can ask for help and people still have respect for me. And so all of that was so much different. I shouldn't say than I expected. That was a world yet unexplored. I didn't yet know existed, that I learned at that time.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was a lot of great information that we never really hear about. I think you're our first guest ever to talk about like the mental health and prison side of things. We've never heard anything really about that. But if you're listening and you want to hear more about Holly's story, her podcast, From Surviving to Living, is a serial podcast, an audiobook that's available. Is it on Spotify? Is it anywhere that you can hear podcasts? Where can people find it?
Yep, they can find it on all major podcast platforms: iTunes, Apple TV, Spotify, Audible, Amazon. Yeah.
Good. Awesome. And then you can also listen to her From Surviving to Living Spotlight series, where she brings guests in as well as her website is www.hollybot.me to get more of her information about her upcoming books that she's writing, all of that as well.
I'm Holly Bot, and I need a counselor.
Awesome. And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236. And if you're a provider seeking play therapy CEUs, you can find us on patreon.com/youneedatraining. We'll see you for the next episode, Sunday at 5.